Well, hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today to discuss what we don't know and how to use that to drive our intelligence activities. So if everyone is ready, let's get to it. So 15 years in the Marine Corps gave me my grounding in the intelligence field, but later I worked in industry, both on the customer and the vendor side of things. Personally, my life consists working on endless renovations and upgrades in my house. My big plans for Friday night will be installing a new garbage disposal. I love to read and learn. I love to cook, though I do enjoy barbecuing and smoking meat. I'm afraid to say these things around our renowned pitmaster, Mr. Rick Holland. But enough about that. Let's get talking about what we know, what we don't know, and why it matters. So our presentation today, I want to talk to you about the known unknown matrix, the KU matrix, otherwise known as the box of knowledge, also called the knowledge quadrant. We'll then go on to describe in the context of known and unknown information, what exactly are intelligence requirements and gaps and how to use them. We also want to quickly touch on bias. Bias is finally making its way into mainstream conversation. So we'll want to discuss some of the ways major cognitive limitations will influence how you present your information and create unintended intelligence gaps. And then I will present a couple of practical examples of what you can do starting today, where you can not only identify your gaps, but skillfully present that information. And I will do my best to leave some time at the end for questions. And of course, you can always reach me in Slack following the presentation. And as always, I'm available on LinkedIn. So when we think about knowledge and what we actually know about the topic, or any topic for that matter, when we really look at what we base our beliefs on, or what we made our decision off of, or when we make our case, we often find that the information we swore to be solid may not be as concrete as we hoped. So it's interesting to start out writing a presentation about what you don't know, and it would seem like it would be fairly simple and short. But in order to understand fully what you don't know, the converse is also true. You have to understand what you do know. And that's not easy either, as we all know. When my children were young, they used to ask me such zen-like questions like, "Daddy, how much do you know?" And when you really think about that, try sitting with that one over coffee one morning. So when we talk about intelligence gaps, we're talking about the intelligence information gaps, the gaps in understanding something the decision maker finds lacking, right? But before we can identify what information we're missing, we need to look at what we have. There's a common misconception in general, in our industry specifically, that admitting you don't know something is somehow like admitting failure. That's always better just to nod your head and smile, don't ask questions and just pretend it's all good. And somehow that's supposed to show that you're still the expert that you're supposed to be. Well, that's silly, honestly, because true experts, in my opinion, know the limits of their understanding and are comfortable talking about them. After all, it's those limits of understanding, the outer boundaries of our knowledge, that really serve as our guideposts and define our goals. But that only happens if you truly understand what you know. So I will ask you, what do you know? So we're going to look at the known unknown matrix, the box of knowledge, not to be commingled with the triangle of irritation, pyramid of pain, circle of redundancy. As you can see, it's fairly simple, right? Intelligence, information, and value will fall into one of these categories, and think of these, for the paradigm set, as lands that intelligence people are working within and are trying to move about. You have your known knowns, known unknown, unknown known, and the horrible unknown unknown. This is not a new concept. In fact, the knowledge quadrant received a lot of attention in the early 2000s when the US was entering the war with Iraq, Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense were both very keen on using this terminology. I saw it surface recently. I think Gert actually put out something on LinkedIn not too long ago about the unknown known, but I want to get into these different lands to show you how this type of information can impact your presenting. So we go into unknown unknown. This is the worst place to be. A CTI team, you can waste a lot of time in this place. You cannot think of everything that you don't know. The technical side of the house, those folks will often first want to figure out some way to download the internet, and then they'll figure out the filters later. First, we have to get all the data in the system. We have to get our tip with all 8 million IOCs, and then we'll worry about what we're looking for later. On the flip side of that, you have your more traditional analytical folk that came from the Intel community, and they want to sit in a cloistered room and think of every possible question they might encounter and then build requirements off of that before ever writing a single product. This land of unknown unknown is always going to be magnitudes larger than the other lands. And every time you gain ground and know known, it's exponentially increasing in what you don't know about that topic. So try not to spend too much time here. In unknown known, this is where you can save money. Really, this is where the CTI team can find change in the couch cushions, if you will. Somewhere a very lonely knowledge management professional is stirring in their sleep, because I'm telling you that your organization, all the different parts that make up your company that sit around your team, they have a lot of knowledge sitting there, uncatalogued, unfiltered, unused. But it's usually very accessible if you only knew that it existed. If you have questions about potential impact of a DDoS, a specific DDoS attack that's going to, that could impact your organization, before you write that assessment for the boss, you might want to talk to your own DDoS team or your DDoS protection vendor. They have a lot of information and they're already paid for before you write your CTI assessment for leadership. If you want to know about all the truly, really scary vulnerabilities and gaps in your defenses, go down and hang out in the smoke pit, the vape pit next to the Security Operations Center. You'll learn quite a bit spending some time with the actual hands-on keyboard defenders down there. I would say that 90 to 99% of what a good Intel team actually needs to do their job, all that information already exists inside the organization. They just need to find the right person and the right tool to get it. You don't need new feeds for this. You don't need new tools, but you do need process and you need awareness. But why would you pay extra for something if you already have it organic to your organization? That's money saved. The next land is known unknown. And this is where we spend most of our time, or you should spend most of your time as an Intel organization. This is where your intelligence requirements comes from, and also your gaps are discovered. This is how you begin to tap into unknown knowns. Oh, that's a gap. Hey, we know that. The key to this land is writing down what you need to know and sharing it within your org. These requirements come from a collaboration process with your stakeholder. I know we talked about it in the last session with Sherman. You have to work with your stakeholder to not only define requirements, but also manage those expectations. Once you have your requirements, then you can identify what you already have in place. What are the resources and the information that you have readily available? And what do you still need? What are the gaps? Where are they coming from? But you have to have a requirements tracking system underneath all of that. This should be part of your collection plan before you even go off to answer these questions, is figure out what do we actually know, and then what is out there that we have to collect. Now, gaps are okay. You don't hide from them, and you certainly don't ignore them. Use those gaps to frame your analysis. Known unknowns, satisfying requirements, filling the gaps. This should be where you spend most of your time as an Intel person. This is how you justify your existence, and this is how you tie your value as an intelligence professional to the organization's dollars. the whole idea that an intelligence team needs to be the super smartest experts in the room and they know everything about everything really hurts the industry. And there is a tendency for people to shy away from the fact that they don't know something. That's okay. Somebody in your organization does. There's a lot of smart people in your organization that have a lot of really good information. Sometimes it's not the role of intelligence to know something, but it's their role to facilitate, to make sure the information that already exists gets to the right decision maker in time for them to make a confident decision. They're even happier when the decision maker doesn't have to write a check for an additional tool. They use the resources that you already have. By documenting this, showing where you get your information, planning out your collection activities, showing how you have gaps, how you fill them, that makes your decision makers happy. All right, on to the final land, known. This is, intelligence nirvana, the promised land for all of us intelligence weenies. You have the right information, you have it, you know where it is, and you can readily produce it in a timely manner to support the decision maker so they can make that confident decision. Sadly, for all you pet lovers out there, we have Amazon showing up at the perfect time. The sun sets quickly here if you don't keep at it. You will find yourself in known unknown and unknown known very quickly. The two greatest obstacles to providing excellent intelligence to a decision maker are time and awareness. Everything expires over time, and awareness, you have to be aware of not only what you're going after, but what your audience needs, your stakeholders, what are they requiring from you? What are your customers actually using your information for? You don't necessarily have to have all the information available at any given time to provide exceptional decision support. But you and your decision maker, your stakeholder, whoever you're providing intelligence to, they must understand what information you do have, what you don't have, why, what is truly needed, and what is just a want. It all goes back to managing those expectations. And I know Sherman touched on that in the last presentation. So now that we've talked about the lands of known and unknown, let's actually talk a little bit more about how do we start using this information and thinking about how we use this information. Sadly, one of my favorite teachers and authors passed away last week. So I thought I'd share a quote of his. We need to always be looking at what we know and why we came to know it. There are no absolutes in the intelligence world, and we must maintain an awareness of what we think we know. So our decision makers are happiest when we're in the land of known knowns. Decisions are made quickly because everything that they want to know is in one quick email, Slack or Discord. We also know that known is a mythical place, semi-mythical, and the Intel unicorns are only found in CTI job descriptions because information changes. It stales, it's updated, it evolves, the variables expand and shrink. So the reality is we're constantly in the land of known unknowns. We know what we need to make the decision maker happy. And we want to cross back over into the known knowns. If only we just had these few things, right? Then we'd all be good. And of course, even better, once we know them, we don't ever have to worry about them again. Well, not so much. Some things we'll never know, and that's okay. Some things we can't know today, tomorrow, but we can with time, that's okay. But before we run off and try to get something new, we always should take that moment to check with your neighbors, see what they have, see what they already know. So check within your org first. There's lots of things to think about when we try to operationalize, seeking after the unknown information, but that's okay. It's awareness, right? There is a common phrase, corporate knowledge, right? So when somebody leaves the team or leaves the organization, there's a little bit of frustration that, the corporate knowledge that they took with them. It's all that understanding of process and experience that disappears when a seasoned member of the team leaves. So when that team member leaves, there's a belief that all that knowledge leaves with them, but that's not necessarily true. It doesn't just disappear, it's just now cut off from that team. All that knowledge still exists, it just exists outside of your particular silo of excellence. That's why it's critical to have a means to publish your intelligence gaps, publish your requirements, before you go commit to spending time and resources and collecting information. The information you need might already exist inside your organization. It's just an unknown known, right? Just no one knows you need it. So if you assume that no one could possibly know what you need to know or have what you need, then you're ready for our next topic, first of all. But you need to remember that you and your team alone, as just the intel folks, you cannot fill your decision makers' intelligence gaps. You cannot satisfy the requirements all by yourself. You need to work collaboratively across your organization. There are many smart people who would love to share what they know about your organization and what they do on a daily basis that has relevance to you. You just have to, buy them coffee, write down, ask them questions and write it all down. For you pet lovers out there. So we're going to go into another topic that has a huge impact on intelligence gaps. Has a massive impact on how you look for information, how you analyze it once you find it, how you present it, what you consider as a gap, and that's bias. Everybody has it. It cannot be helped. It's shaped by your experience, your education, your general societal exposure. You can't get rid of it, but you can at least be aware of it and mitigate the effects in your intelligence reporting and collection. So much like a good Lao Tzu quote, know thyself, we cybersecurity professionals, we love to talk about cognitive biases. If you spend any time with this subject, taking any classes, you'll know that there are a lot. There's I have a list of at least 60 that came out of this book, and then there's many more on top of that if you're looking at different industries. Way too many to discuss here. And honestly, if your intelligence program is not up to speed where you're ready to tackle full-on structured analytical techniques, just a basic understanding will suffice. But if you want to know more, and since I know that everybody has this book on their desktop for easy to access reference, I would like you to look at chapter 2 on structured techniques, specifically 2.3 on cognitive limitations. It'll give you a good overview of how these impact your day-to-day work. The authors, Pearson and Hoyer Jr., it's a solid overview on cognitive biases, misapplied heuristics, and intuitive traps. But the three big ones that I want to touch on are confirmation bias. You see that a lot in the news these days, where you're looking for things that you agree with and discarding everything else. Groupthink, which is, always trust the group to make the best decisions for the individual. And you discard anything that an individual has to say, or problem is groupthink also encourages individuals not to say anything. And then the big one that I think impacts larger organizations especially is projecting past experiences. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Well, that's what happened to us last year. You have to be careful of those. The more you read about them, the more you study them, the more you'll start seeing them come out in your work and other people's works. But, how does this impact your intelligence gaps? Well, for starters, do you actually know what you think you know? And just because it was true a year ago or a month ago or a year ago, doesn't mean that it's still true now. When you made that decision a year ago, what were your gaps at the time? What lack of resources did you have? Different tooling systems? There's so many different variables that might have been different. So even if the facts remain the same, the context has shifted, and do you know why? Now, some of you might see the implications of this. So not only saying that you have to find new information, but you have to go back and review everything that you ever knew to be true in the past. Is that what I'm saying? Yeah, actually, but you don't have to do it all at once. So as you are, if all of a sudden we had Iranian DDoS attacks again, like Ababil back in 2014, 13 and 14, all that information is still valid, but it doesn't necessarily dictate what's going to happen tomorrow in today's crisis. So use the past to understand how you came to those conclusions, that analysis, those recommendations to shape what you're doing, but don't rely on it as fact, because the threat actors might be different, they might be more evolved, the techniques have changed, lots of things are different. So what you knew to be true is likely to be different as well. And looking at this slide, think about those phrases. This is how we've always done it. Think about where they might lead you or others astray. Now, can you fix all of these in a day? Can you fix these for yourself? Can you suddenly be aware of all your biases and change that? Can you fix it in your team? No, of course not. But that's okay. So the path to cyber enlightenment begins with awareness, right? So being aware of the bias first, and then helping each other work through that and plan for it is the path to success. And so we move on. I don't know who actually wrote the script, lines for Yoda, but whoever that is, I could probably follow around the desert for a while and learn quite a bit. But all this yammering aside, like, how do we put this to work? How do I get to actually do this and apply my intelligence gaps to my day-to-day work, right? So practical application. Here's a sample intelligence report template, or half of it at least. This is what we use at RecFast. We're coaching teams. If you look at any intelligence community agency report, chances are it's going to have at least the similar headings, format. It could be metadata that the customer doesn't see. It really doesn't matter, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things. There are a couple of opportunities to not only catch your bias, but kind of refine your requirements, identify your gaps, refine those gaps, and that's peer review. So in this example, before the analyst goes to publish this report that they've written, not only just to check for grammar, spelling, readability, and voice, but we also want somebody to check the key assumptions. And so key assumptions check being one of those structured analytical techniques that's found in that book that people often use. It can be very simple of just the analyst assuming that they know something to be true. The brain doesn't like missing puzzle pieces and will often work subconsciously to fill in the missing gaps. So it takes another person, ideally several, to help the author identify those. This is the opportunity for the reviewer to play devil's advocate, to ask the questions: who, the why, the so what, who cares, how do you know this? Cite your source, right? So that's one example. And then in the same report, going down to the next few fields, you actually have a section on intelligence gaps. This is something that I was always impressed with coming out of the Intel community and starting in the corporate side. The American Express team was really good when they read reports. They had an actual segment in there on intelligence gaps. They're admitting what was still out there, and they're letting the decision maker know what that person can't know or won't know in time. By highlighting the gaps, you're showing that you've thought about this problem, right? You understand that there's things that you can't provide and that they might want to know, but you're managing those expectations. You're helping the decision maker with more accurate information. So there you go. There's two examples in one report today, how you can start making a change and start checking not only your bias, but start publishing your gaps like I recommended. Yesterday, Gert talked about the techniques of forecasting and brought up a great point. You have to put in the work to get what you want, and it's just the same when you're identifying intelligence gaps and refining your requirements. And then Garrett brought up on feedback, and feedback is critical for refining requirements. We all do it poorly, but it needs to be done. This is how you follow the intelligence cycle. Something as simple as CISO asked, "Did you see this?" Analyst writes a response, sends it back. That's all current intelligence, as Sherman outlined. Did you see this 0 day or whatnot? But there's still a process there that you can apply. Feedback refines your requirements by sticking to this process. That's how you fight, Sherman's tyranny of current intelligence, or what I call like the shiny headline syndrome. It's having that process, having deep structure to your process that keeps you out of the shallow, low impact waters. Even Katie and Melanie yesterday bringing up the type of thoughtful needs analysis that you go into who you hire for your program. It's the same process, and now your product is the intelligence team, not just the report you write with the information you've collected. So for a quick recap, we have talked about the known unknown matrix. We talked about what knowledge is, what you know, what you can know. We talked specifically how the land of known unknowns is how you drive your intelligence requirements and identify your intelligence gaps. You might be able to satisfy those requirements, fill those gaps, if you tap into the land of unknown knowns. You let people know, hey, we're looking for this. Does anybody else have this? We'll also talk about how your own cognitive limitations, your bias impacts what you know and what you don't know. Even as your bias of other teams couldn't possibly be as smart as the Intel team, right? You may think you're in the land of known, but you very well could be wrong. And then one key point I should probably have dedicated a whole slide to was time and awareness. Time and awareness, the obstacles of providing great intelligence. Over time, and with lack of awareness, intelligence information will suffer entropy. There's a lot here, and I get it that operationally this is a lot to keep track of, but once again, if you have a process in place, you have the tools, you have requirements management and source management and customer management, all that good stuff, you can do this. It's a repeatable process, and it is scalable as well. A lot of it goes into working with your stakeholder, the recipient of your intelligence. It's a collaborative process. It's agile. You're constantly checking back in. Do you like me? Yes or no? Check the box, right? Not everything can be known, and that's okay. It's understanding why not, which helps the decision maker. And sometimes that can actually add to their confidence, is understanding what they can and cannot have. And a couple of simple techniques that we talked about today, putting in your intelligence gaps in your report and your requirements, announcing what you need to know, see what other people can help with, and that peer review. Show your work, check your work, prove to somebody before you send it out for publishing, why I know this and to be true. So that's something you can implement today. Over the next 6, 12, 18 months, you got to have a plan. Just like building a team takes planning and effort, the same thing goes to actually pushing out your intelligence work. And remember, your library of requirements are what? It's a long list of things that you need to know for decision makers to make decisions. If you share them, they won't necessarily be gaps, because other people can fill in those blanks. So that is all I have.